So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing.
I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen. And we're back, drinking beer out of Taylor's fridge. What are we drinking today?
We're drinking Elysian's Hazy Contact, Hazy IPA. What do you think?
I like it. I haven't had this before.
Good.
Very nice. Out of a can or a bottle?
Out of a can.
I like it.
Thought
Quite tasty. This is a personal favorite, nude pick.
It's a 6-pack that I bought right when quarantine was rumored to be starting. So I grabbed something that looked a little bit fresh, a little bit new, a little nuance, little flavor to my lifestyle here in under C19 law. And yeah, these are the last 2 cans. I'm glad you like them.
Got to try to keep things fresh in every way we can.
Which is very limited at this point.
This is true.
As always, we have our first impressions. We have limited series today. We're going to be going over The Undoing from HBO, and I Know This Much Is True also from HBO. Let's start with The Undoing.
All right.
Tonight, the gruesome discovery of a mother bludgeoned to death.
Nobody seems to really know anything.
What are the police making of it?
Mom, you're acting strange.
Detective Jeffrey Mendoza, NYPD.
We are investigating a crime. So if you know something, tell us what it is.
You either read me my rights right now, or tell me I'm free to go.
All right, that was the trailer for The Undoing, a miniseries coming soon from HBO. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that definitely felt more like a teaser trailer than a full-length trailer. I don't know more now, really, than when I started, besides I'm excited to see Noah Jupe flesh out his acting chops with some extended character work. I think that's one of the most important things for developing actors, is getting to play characters that are a little bit more breathy. So limited series are a good way to get that in. Nicole Kidman looks to be doing Nicole Kidman things. Not bad, not good, just Nicole Kidman-y. Sutherland, I can take or leave. I don't know if, whatever this show is about is really going to cement whether or not I'm interested in it. It looks fine. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look bad. It looks fine. It doesn't seem well written. It doesn't seem poorly written. It seems fine. Take it or leave it. How about you?
I think I'm in the same place as you. It looks compelling enough. It's like a kind of thriller, strong cast. I like most of these actors. Would agree that the teaser trailer doesn't give us a lot about what it is about, which is maybe just not a strong enough sales pitch at the moment when there is so much content of this kind. You got to differentiate yourself a little better than that, but doesn't look bad.
The title that says The Undoing without showing us what might be The Undoing.
Yeah.
It's a little pretentious.
When we're all at home and, under an avalanche of content, it just not looking bad is probably not enough of a differentiator.
Not for us, at least. On to I Know This Much Is True.
If she would have just let me raise it the way he should have been raised, maybe he would have ended up on the bottom the way he did.
Trey, he's a paranoid schizophrenic. It's not Mom's fault. It's not anybody's fault.
There was an incident.
Hey, Dominic?
What'd you do?
All right, Michael, that was the trailer for I Know This Much Is True from Derek Cianfrance. What do you think?
Well, I thought this would be a good pick for today because we have a movie starring Mark Ruffalo. I did not know going into this that we have Mark Ruffalo in this starring opposite Mark Ruffalo. I did not realize he was playing two brothers, identical twins. I'm kind of mixed on this director's work, Derek Cianfrance, but am kind of, this piqued my interest. It looks a little more cinematic to me, maybe, than what I was expecting. I'm kind of curious to know how this will play out in an episodic fashion. Curious to see how Mark Ruffalo pulls off these dual roles. I'm kind of curious. What about you?
I'm thrilled.
Are you?
I'm absolutely thrilled. I couldn't be more happy. I love The Place Beyond the Pines, to put it lightly. I think it's one of the greatest triptychs in like modern plays, with different characters that's all technically about one thing, which is the evolution of a family over time. I think that the way that he captures humanity with characters and moments is really permanent. If you remember, Ryan Gosling's 1/3 of that film, but he's so memorable that he takes up a lot of your bandwidth. But Bradley Cooper is also another full third of that film. And I think that that type of style really suits limited series, and something that's that seems faithfully adapted, but with liberties taken, that's this well cast. Melissa Leo, she is a foundational block to any project, I think. So when you cast her, you get where it's just completely transformative. So to me, this is going to be a Neighborhood style limited series that's about two brothers over time, and I think it looks fucking great. I'm very happy.
I love me some Catherine Hahn. I'm very excited to see her here. Yeah, strong cast, no doubt.
On to Mark Ruffalo and Laura Linney in You Can Count on Me.
I don't know what the church's official position is on adultery these days. So, what is the official position these days?
Well, it's a sin.
How was school?
Stupid. Were you a wild kid?
Not as wild as your mom.
Mom, were you?
No comment.
You Can Count on Me is from year 2000, from writer-director Kenneth Lonergan.
I'm sorry, I think you mean my favorite priest.
That's right. We'll talk about that scene, I imagine.
Which one? There's a few.
I guess he does have two, maybe even three.
He has three, yeah. But you're talking about the meaty one.
I'm thinking the one with Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The intervention scene, essentially.
I came into this with very high expectations, having worked backwards through Kenneth Lonergan's filmography. What about you? High hopes going in?
This is my
Any
second
expectations?
one. I still haven't gotten to Margaret. I had every intention to get to Margaret. Still haven't done it. It's a little bit daunting. It's so highly praised. It's so long. It feels like I'm getting ready to watch The Godfather, which I just watched for the first time this month. So I'm pacing myself for these masterworks is the only way that I can put it. I liked this movie a lot. I don't think it's perfect, but I appreciate it the same way that I appreciate what's his name? Not David Lynch, but the guy that made Dead Man, the guy that made the zombie movie.
Jim Jarmusch?
Yes. He reminds me a lot of Jim Jarmusch here, and the way that he's telling his story differently, but it's always something that feels personal to the creator of the project, I guess. It feels distinctly American. It doesn't feel rehashed. It doesn't feel recycled. It feels sincere and honest and American in that way that I like, that's like rustic Americana.
Yeah, it's like if you don't like the milieu that Lonergan is interested in, you're probably just not going to like Lonergan, right?
Yes,
he does kind of working class, middle class WASP types. But, I like that he just looks at people with ordinary human flaws, right? And just kind of approaches it with empathy and not a great deal of judgment. I think that's very much the case here.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's any judgment, which at some points made me uncomfortable as a viewer.
Yeah. It's about a grown brother and sister whose parents were killed in a car accident when they were young. We see that in the first 60 seconds, maybe.
All right.
Very
so
quick.
Quick question, because this has been bothering me since I watched the movie.
What you got?
In the beginning of the film, a police officer comes and knocks on the door and takes Laura Linney's younger sister out, right? Younger Laura Linney's there in the doorway. She's taken out, and she's told by the police officer to tell the kids, to tell the boys, I believe, that she's going to step out for a moment. I was under the impression there was more than one brother. Then that was never addressed in the entire film, and I watched the whole thing and have been confused ever since.
Now I wonder if my memory is completely playing tricks on me. I was about to say that the babysitter was neither of them, Laura Linney or Mark Ruffalo's character, but just a babysitter to the two of them. You're saying there was two boys in there?
I thought it was two. Maybe I'm wrong.
It might have been a little girl with a little boy's haircut, because that does happen.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, you only see them in the background watching TV. I was just under the impression that she was the older sibling that was watching her younger brother, I guess. And that kind of built
You're like,
up
where's this
for
third
me
sibling?
the role. So I always knew who Laura Linney was based on that impression. Maybe that's the wrong impression.
I see. Yeah, I assumed that was a separate babysitter watching little Mark Ruffalo and Laura Linney characters.
That changes things.
You're going to have to reposition some ideas now, I imagine.
Yeah, I'll get back to you in a year on that.
Understood. Yeah, I think there are aspects of this movie I like better than others. But I like that it kind of has its different dimensions. We get this relationship between a brother and sister kind of at the core, and then how they each relate to Laura Linney's character's son, like 7, 8 years old, something like that.
Rory Culkin.
That's right, who I think is very good.
Very good.
And then we separately kind of explore Laura Linney's character's personal life as well as his, but maybe a little bit less so, because he's not doing too much. Yeah, I think
we explore his character.
I would agree. I think of these kind of different dimensions, I was maybe most interested in Laura Linney's love life.
Yeah, it was definitely the most costly thing to me as a viewer.
Yeah, I think there's maybe the most going on there. I'm very interested in their relationship as brother and sister. Maybe a little less interested in what it does with Ruffalo's character and the son. In him maybe kind of playing this kind of pseudo-father figure role, only because it felt like that's maybe where it came close to bordering on cliche for me. Did you feel that way at all or not so much?
I definitely, like, what you're saying has a ring of truth to it, but I think that the way that Lonergan goes about it is too sincere for that to ring well. Although it does ring true. It doesn't ring well. Like, it's not too cliche, because he does show up to take him fishing after he decides to be an asshole and say that he's not going to, because he does take him out in the middle of the night to the bar while she's out with her boyfriend to play pool in a bar illegally. There's just so much that he does wrong that's so human that it doesn't get to the cliche that it, for me, would be melodrama, I guess. Like, it never feels melodrama. He gets angry. He's getting stoned constantly, and he's trying to be useful, I guess. Trying to find a temporary fit. I think that maybe I put a lot of context onto what he was going through in his head, knowing that as soon as he left, his girlfriend had committed or attempted to commit suicide, and that everything he was doing was trying to... It was in some way affected by that. I think his character was complex enough that although it had twinges of melodrama, it never committed to it.
I think I would agree. If it were any other director or even an unknown, I don't know that it would even come across my mind. It's only that, like, I like these other movies so much that I like maybe am holding him to a particularly high standard. You know, so I can't help but separate the things I responded to most from the ones I responded to maybe not quite so much. But even that dynamic, I think, is perhaps informed by him just not having grown up with a father of his own, and him just sort of instinctively, you know, maybe stepping in to fill that role. I mean, I definitely think there's pathos to that.
I think he did stuff that Laura couldn't in this film. I think taking Rory to go meet Rory Sr. particularly was one of them, where he did do the right thing so that that boy could know reality. But at some level, you don't want him to have to know that. But it's also important that he does. And I think that that's something that only, you know, his character in this film could have done. And I do think that that was the correct moral choice. Even though it was hard and hurt Laura, I still think something like that was the right choice. And that's where Lonergan gets really interesting to me. And, you know, having characters that do the right thing that feels wrong to the character that we're most focused on or on the side of. I always find that stuff interesting. I think, you know, it's not nearly the same thing, but when Michelle has to talk to Casey in Manchester, you know, she's doing what needs to be done and Casey can't handle it. It's not the same thing, but it's similar, I think, at a base level.
Yeah. Yeah, partly because the movie, you know, never really confronts head on the car accident that we see in the first minute of the movie. For me, like, I'm just thinking about how that's like informed who these people are in so many different ways. And I definitely thought about Casey Affleck's character and how just coming back to the town of, I think the town is called Manchester by the Sea in that movie. How just even being back in that town is painful. And how that's maybe this similar to the kind of feeling Mark Ruffalo's character might have had, and that's what, you know, sort of was the foundation for him becoming this kind of drifter. Whereas she, who knows, might have done something similar had she not had a kid and needed to sort of find stability. But I don't know, the way it lets us kind of contemplate how that informs the paths they each have taken, I think is really nice that it really leaves that space for us to kind of explore. Yeah, I think that I have a totally different read, and I don't feel confident that I'm right or that you're right. That's the beauty of a Lonergan character, I think, is we each come up with different internal narratives that make sense to us for why these characters are making choices, and he gets us to want to make those up. That's the thing that is distinctly Lonergan to me. But I'm only 2 films in. I think that Mark Ruffalo's journey as a performer is one of the most interesting overlooked journeys of a performer that I can think of, just because I personally haven't really been aware of him for that long. I think that he first became someone I loved during Spotlight, then he rose to stardom during Avengers and all the Marvel stuff, obviously, as the Hulk. But he's got a very interesting early part of his career, I think, that really reminds me a little bit of Norton or Christian Bale, giving these nuanced performances of characters that are from the other side of the tracks. And then you look at Dark Waters, and I think that he's still continuing to do these really artistic projects, The Normal Heart, or like we just covered, I Know This Much Is True, while he's maintaining a star presence, which is very interesting to me. Kind of Scarlett Johansson-ish. Yeah, he does strike me as a very relatable kind of screen presence. He's always quite sympathetic. Like, I have a harder time, although there's probably evidence that I'm just not thinking of. I have a harder time imagining him as an anti-hero. Although I think he's maybe talented enough to pull it off. I think I mostly think of him in my head when he pops in there as the kind of guy who I can kind of just understand in some way.
Yeah, if he was an anti-hero, he'd be very sympathetic.
Probably. Yeah. The kind of anti-hero who is bad because he had a very sad upbringing or something.
Yeah, like you could put the evilest mustache on him you want, but I'm still gonna feel like I understand where he's coming from, and it's a real shame that he's in the situation he's in.
Yeah. I think he's really good here. I think Laura Linney's really good. I like Matthew Broderick as the very strict manager.
I hated him, which is a sheer sign of success of him as a performer, because he's so likable, and he did such a good job at getting me to not like him.
He succeeded for me in that regard. I like their very first exchange between him and Laura Linney. Which is just, a great example of the kind of thing that I think Lonergan does well. It's just the show don't tell kind of approach to characterization, where she's standing up to him a little bit about needing to go out at 3 o'clock and drive her kid home. He's pushing back, but in that exchange, you get a sense of her backbone, her willingness to stand up to herself, but also not extreme stubbornness. She does ultimately concede and says, okay, I'll figure something out. And you perfectly get the sense for how seriously he's taking this job. It's those just ordinary everyday exchanges that are just well written enough to give us a perfect sense for who these people are and what their priorities are and that kind of thing.
And then the background of having an office that seems like a real office. And the casting, although very brief, of J. Smith Cameron as someone who needs to have offset colors on her monitor to type is just, as someone who loves J. Smith now because of Succession, it's just great to go
She's
back
the
and
culprit,
see her.
right? She did it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. She definitely did it. And wondering if those people in the office know what's going on when the door closes. There's so much raw potential, I guess, to a lot of scenes in this movie that it just kept me engrossed the whole time. I don't think anything looked particularly great.
I would agree.
I don't think I have a favorite scene or anything like that. Like, there's moments of energy that are really important that I retain, but the cinematography isn't something that I found gripping. I also don't think that I ever had a scene that I really truly loved in Manchester by the Sea. But to me, it doesn't lessen the film, it deepens it. And that's something really rare. I think that you don't have that very often. It's a very special storyteller that gets by without doing really tricky stuff with the camera to try to engross the viewer.
Yeah, I think from the people who don't care for Lonergan so much, it seems to me like the complaint is usually that it's just not cinematic enough. And I think that's fair. I think in Manchester, there's a cinematic quality to the editing. Like, that's so much about some of those flashbacks. Here, I think I can get that. You're right. Like, I don't think there are shots or any instances of blocking that really blew my mind. It's kind of about the acting and just the approach to characterization that just rings really true, and it's just kind of the subtlety of the writing and that kind of thing. And
I mean, but even if you get into blocking, I mean, I guess it depends on if you mean staging as well as blocking. But some of the bar stuff was brilliantly staged and blocked, I think, for the amount of crowd that they had in there to try to show what they were showing from different perspectives and to give us the feeling that someone was looming over and watching. I don't know if you remember that scene, but during the pool, when he takes him out in the middle of the night, we get the sense that there's a presence watching. And then we get a brief glimpse. And the way that they pull that off, I think, was pretty brilliantly staged, personally, in a low light area and trying to show everything. But
yeah,
nothing deeply ad astra.
I would agree. No Hoyte van Hoytema.
No, there's
work
no
here.
There's no empty souls reflections like we're gonna get to in 35 Shots of Rum. There's no deepening of the shadows that makes you question whether or not someone's lurking behind her that we're gonna get in 4 months, 3 weeks, 2 days. There's just a really basic rustic sense to the film, which I think pays dividends on the back end. It has aged gracefully.
Yeah. I think it's more like subtle instances of dialogue that will stick with me more than shots or particular scenes, whether it was Mark Ruffalo insisting that the kid wear a seatbelt, and you're just forced to think about how many times over the course of his entire life has he had to think about the death of his parents when he puts on a seatbelt. Or at the very end, I don't know about you, but it always drives me a little nuts to have a film, drop its title in a real obvious kind of way. And it very nicely gets around that in that very final scene where they're all sitting on the bench and he says, "Come on, sis, what did we always say to each other?" Mm-hmm. Well, we know the title of the movie. I thought that was nice and subtle. And then, just her saying something in the middle of a conversation and before it moves right along, she says, I wish Mom was here. And, those just sting, even though we don't see the sting on her face, just because we get to imagine how much they've felt that over the course of their whole lives. So it's those details, I think, that are taking up, what a great shot might have done or something.
Yeah, and the characters, one trying to keep the memory alive, staying in the same town, keeping the house going, visiting the grave, which is the shot that we get, which is, I guess, something that I would actually call my favorite shot of the film. It's a very unique shot where we start with a close-up of the grave. We start with a shot that is like the sunlight hitting a meadow, and then we zoom out really slowly and deliberately, and we get Laura Linney's perspective as she's looking at the gravestone, placing flowers, and that's how the film starts, I believe. And that's just interesting, but it gives you the feeling of this death marks the entire film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that is probably one of the great shots because it's like we see that and the grieving's already kind of done, but it's also not, like it never really stop. But we're also, this is not about these characters in the throes of grief, it's more about like the long term of, effect of it, I guess. I would agree that is a good looking shot.
All right. I think we've pretty thoroughly dug in to Kenneth Lonergan's You Can Count on Me, on to 35 Shots of Rome.
Let's move on.
Ton père est pas rentré, y a pas de lumière chez vous.
Moi aussi, je pars. On peut très bien faire comme lui.
Ça arrive à rien, tout ça. Pense un peu à toi.
Bah, c'est pas mon jour. Vous croyez que j'aurai une course pour Roissy ou Saint-Cloud? Bah non, rien que des petites courses.
This film stars one of your favorite new directors, Mati Diop. It is directed by Claire Denis. What do you think about this one, Michael?
I love this movie. I came in a little apprehensive, I guess. I have not all out loved a Claire Denis movie yet. There have been things I've liked about most of them. High Life was one of the few movies I watched twice because I just felt like it was my kind of thing, and then I still didn't quite connect with it on round 2. So I was like, I just don't know that this is a director who is for me, but I was wrong. I love this movie. What about you?
I think this is my High Life from her.
Oh.
This definitely reminded me of Nocturama. There's a lot of dark French cityscape that's shot beautifully. Lighting and shadow is immaculate. The opening shot where we see reflections of the passengers on the train in the glass feels like a CG special effect to make it seem like there's specters on this in the city, I guess, that are moving, but really what there are is there's people on a train going through the town. I think that it evokes a deep sense of mortality. It's an incredibly introspective film that never explains itself. It never tries to meet the viewer halfway. It makes you come all the way. And I don't love it, but I really, responded to the visuals of it. I more in the high life vein where I like the sci-fi, I like the imagery, I like the motifs, I like the themes, I like the iconography that I saw in the high life film. It's more my thing. I love sci-fi. You love a little bit more low grade type of a movie that's got great cinematography, and this film has it in spades, and it also has your favorite director as its lead actress,
who I really liked.
Yeah. It's catnip for you.
Yeah It's very much my pace and rhythm. I think the first 10 minutes is like 5 minutes of just footage of these trains
here's the word, ethereal. There it is. I had to think of Atlantics, and I found it.
I think that is appropriate. With just kind of that melancholy score that I really liked, and then there's just this kind of mundane drama of watching, this father and daughter make dinner together after she's bought a rice cooker that she assumed he would forget to buy, but he actually did remember to buy. Now I kind of sound like I'm repeating myself after You Can Count on Me, but I think there are various dimensions to this one too, whether it's, this father-son or father-daughter dynamic, and then how they each relate to neighbors who have an affection for them. I think it's just kind of a fascinating setup of interpersonal relationships, and it's all done through like implication versus explication that lets you kind of fill in the gaps. I love that. I just think there's so much feeling there. It's just really kind of sad but human, especially with like you said, you used the word mortality. I think this kind of fear of death kind of hangs over it in a pretty deep way.
Interesting. I viewed it more as they were already dead.
Oh, that is a heavier reading.
Yeah. Well, just the way that it starts out with them being reflected on the glass while you're looking out of that train front window. I didn't get the impression they were living a full life, more that they were half-lives or specters or things wandering the street looking for meaning. I think that the rice cooker's a very interesting metaphor and an interesting icon, right? Because rice cooker's essentially about getting things perfect. It's all in the timing. And the end of the film has her rice cooker out next to her father's rice cooker. And to me, that's, there's something in there about getting the timing right and trying to make everything perfect or embracing that things aren't perfect. It's hard to say, but there's something there, just like there's something with the Native American TV gray screen in High Life. There's something there. I can't tell you exactly what it is. I don't know why the baby's watching that. I don't know why the rice cookers are the beginning and the end of the film, but it's something that is true, and there's something to chew on there.
Yeah, I like that. I was almost nervous to talk about this movie because there are these ambiguous notes that I still don't know that I have a clear reading of. But
that makes me feel better. I
thought
I was stupid. I was like, I don't get this movie.
Well, yeah,
I have a lot of feelings about it, but I don't intellectually get it.
Yeah, I had a very strong reaction to it, but I still don't think I could offer you a dense interpretation of even what the 35 shots of rum necessarily means.
I'm glad
to
you
these
said
people.
that, because I was about to bring that up. They definitely were drinking a clear liquid at the bar. That was not rum.
That bothersome.
It's not bothersome. I just want to clarify that wasn't the rum. Or is rum different in France? I just want to understand the film intellectually, and I feel like every time I do, I get punched in the face
research.
And pushed backwards.
Gotta look up what they were drinking, I suppose.
Yeah. Because the girl says she's not going to drink anymore, so that's where maybe we get the odd number of shots. I'm willing to give that in. But so maybe it would have been 12. Maybe there were 12 people taking shots 3 times. But then for the third shot, she said, no, I've had too much. And then only 11 people took the shot, and that's how we get to 35. That's me just pulling at straws, trying to make any sense of the title.
Yeah. specifics, I don't have much. My only thought was that, like, in a general sense, like, do they think there is going to be like a good outcome or a bad outcome from drinking 35 shots? And my interpretation as of now is that the father figure goes from not wanting to do it to saying that it is okay to now do it. So what has changed? What would have made him now comfortable to give it a shot? Well, his daughter is getting married now. And part of this to me was about his thinking about her having to care for him. You kind of get that in the scene where he's hung over, and she brings him some, a drink of some kind. And he says, I want you to be able to, be free to do what you want to do, or something like that, which seems very preliminary. Like, I think he has years to live, but I still think that's what's maybe weighing on his mind. So I actually came to think that maybe the 35 shots, like, is almost more like a dare. Like, no one can go past 35 or something like that. 35 is where you're done. And he says, I don't know. Maybe there is some comfort he has found at this point that he's willing to take the dare or something. But I don't know. I'm probably going to listen to myself say this and be like, nah, that's not right.
I don't have any refutations to what you said. I can just say that this film is definitely a film of duality, because I have a very different read on some of that stuff, where, to me, they started drinking because it was an effort to salvage the night, and he was just embracing trying to salvage the night, and then he ended up having fun and embracing it further. And it's more about the rolling with the punches, to me, this film is. Because they set out to go to the concert, car breaks down, they're pushing it, they eventually give up, they go to call in the bar someone, they end up not going through with the phone call, or she ends up calling him back and telling him to not send the taxi, I believe, because it was her boss that she was calling, I think. And then the father ends up dancing with the woman who's working at the bar. They end up it's just, they embrace the failure. I'm sure you've had nights where you plan to go out, you have this thing that you're planning to do, you have tickets for it and everything, and it just doesn't go your way. Someone's not in the mood to go, whether it's you or someone else, and the night changes, but it actually ends up being a better time for it. To me, that's kind of what that stuff near the end led to, personally. That's the way
interesting.
That I saw it.
That is quite a scene. I don't know that I read it in quite the same way as, like, the night turned out for the better. It depends on who you are in that scene, I guess. I mean, the young man comes on to Matty Diop's character. She turns him down. And then the father starts dancing with the woman while the older woman neighbor watches longingly. I love that scene and how that's all unspoken, and you just see these people's feelings kind of out there in the open as they watch, the people they want turn them down or start dancing with someone else. I think there's a lot in that scene. Definitely one of my favorites. I think she is a very sensual filmmaker. I think that's definitely
that's
the case in that scene.
That's a safe case to make.
Yeah. I don't know. It's partly just about finding, meaning in life, whether that's wrapped up in your work. I think you get that through this coworker of the father who retires and seems then just completely kind of adrift. Like, he looks just so heavy-hearted after that party, with this look of just not knowing what to do next, and just knowing that, like, he just waits to die now. And then to see him come back to that train for a ride with his buddy and just kind of realize how much that was sort of like an anchor in your life, what work can do. I don't know, that was meaningful for me. And then for other people, it's about relationships, and then how hard it is when you think that's where you'll find meaning and the feelings aren't returned, and how painful that is. I don't know. There's stuff there for me.
So with relationships, and with that interpersonal relationship specifically, I do have a question. When he's cleaning out his locker, is it just me, or does the father look at him with a kind of despise or a scowl?
Oh, I don't remember. That's interesting.
I remember him looking at him very uncomfortably, I'll say. And that set me up to have the opposite expectation of their relationship. And then I spent kind of the rest of the film going, why are they so good now? And I wonder if that's not so much a reflection of his feelings towards that character as his feelings towards that death, that waiting of death, that marker. You know, back to Kenneth Lonergan, that, you know, there's death right here. What are you gonna do with it? Go live and run away from it, or, you know, dedicate your life to it. There's something interesting there.
That's a good example of why a movie like this is hard to talk about, where like the text is in like a glance or something like that. Like you can't read me back the line or something.
No, I can't. And that's what makes Denny an interesting filmmaker, I think, in the long run, and why so many of us are drawn to wanting to talk about her work, because it's very personal. Because whenever you talk about her work, you're essentially talking about yourself, because you're putting it through you every time you talk about it. You can't just quote it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite scene?
Boy, you're putting me on the spot with a favorite scene from a movie that's got beautiful cinematography, but...
It's a very good looking movie.
If I had to pick, it would be the scene where we see the specters of the father, I'm calling them specters, and the man who's retired in the glass on the train directly before we find the dead body on the tracks.
Oh, with a heavy one. Whew. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. How about you?
I think one of my favorites, I'm going to exclude the restaurant scene, because we already talked about that, and go with the scene where Matt T. Diop's character is at work and the friend from class comes in and approaches her, and there's kind of that cutting back and forth between them glancing at each other. I thought that was very, very nicely charged, and I really, really like Matty Diop's performance there. I kept waiting for like a smile or some kind of satisfaction, but she really kind of plays it quite composed. Coy. Yeah, I like the way that played out. So I'll go with that one.
Yeah, this is an interesting movie. I'm not done thinking about it. Any rating I give it is definitely temporary and
subject
contextual to right now. I'd be interested to revisit this movie when I'm 40. You know, it's something that seems like a marker, not like a grave marker particularly as a film, but like a marker on a path where maybe I'll want to walk past this part again.
Makes sense.
On to 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days.
Unișoara asta nu-i de joc.
Vă rog eu frumos să mă ajutați.
Păi ce pula mea, mă? Tu crezi că mă prostești pe mine ca pe ultimul fraier?
This is from 2007, a Romanian film from director Cristian Mungiu.
I hope that is true.
Starting with the facts, you mentioned before we recorded that you watched this over breakfast. How did that go for you?
My stomach still hasn't settled.
Makes sense.
I definitely don't want to revisit this film. It's a very good film. And I hope that no one watches it.
Oh.
Yeah.
For their own
I mean, I guess
sake?
there's some people that I would want to watch it. But yeah, just for queasiness factors and, you know, not wanting people to be this affected, I definitely wouldn't encourage lighthearted viewers to watch it. But it might have an important message for people that have questions about abortion.
Yeah, it seems like many folks right now are turning to comfort viewing during quarantine. This is probably not at the top of their list.
No, we did not turn to comfort viewing this week.
We did not. Yeah, we took a hard right turn from Preston Sturgis to Cristian Mungiu's 4 months.
Yeah,
2 weeks and 2
there
days.
was not as much laughter or wryness this week. There's a lot of sadness and death. Mainly just death and sadness and death.
Mm-hmm.
And this film also has a little bit of rape. So, take that for what you will. I think it's a great film, but I don't feel comfortable recommending it, I guess, is my point.
Yeah. When people talk about 2007 as a great movie year, the other ones that came out, were Zodiac, There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men. I've always heard of this one as spoken of in the same vein as among the great movies of that year, which I would completely agree with. I completely loved it. Would you consider it up there as well, or do you think this is a?
To me, Zodiac and There Will Be Blood are definitely in a different tier. What was the other film you mentioned?
Oh, No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, all three of those are definitely in a separate tier for me personally. But I don't feel confident in saying that. With foreign language films, I think that I do have a predisposition to need to see them twice before I'm willing to give them the same accreditation that I would maybe give to a film that I watched once in English. But with There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men, I didn't have to watch those multiple times before I felt comfortable with them being considered masterpieces. And I'm still not totally with everybody on either of those films. I think that they're both masterpieces, but I definitely have some disagreements. And, those are for another time.
Yeah, fair enough.
But this does deserve, I think, the same amount of conversation that those films had, regardless of my feelings about if it's in the same tier.
Yeah. I was thinking about going back and making a list of what my favorite movies of that year would have been, and I definitely think this would be on there. I thought it was just riveting, grippingly shot, powerful stuff. I think it would have fit right in our Dardennes episode 2 weeks ago with its style. I think
so. There's really good handhold cinematography where you don't really notice it until you look at the sides of the frame.
Yeah,
and you kind of see the slight lilt.
Oh, I love it so much. I like that it feels very alive in using that style, but there also is this really, I think he has a really strong eye for composition. It's not really a fly on the wall kind of realism. At times it can feel like that when it's in a tracking shot mode, but then there are also these sort of deliberate shots where one character is out of the frame and we're watching the other, even though they're talking to each other. I think that's just kind of masterfully composed in where we're looking and where the camera goes and how it's moving slightly or quickly, and how that all just feeds into this kind of anxiety of having the mechanics of this process work right, whatever that, or not, however that can go right.
There's so many great single shots in it that it's a little bit absurd. I do think that you could toss the dinner table scene from this film up there with any scene in 2007, and I would be very interested to see the scenes that are as good or better than it, because it is so fucking long.
I could not believe how long it went.
But it's so excellently performed by all these supporting actors who only have this one scene, essentially. And then I think about something like right after she's raped and she cleans herself off in the bathroom and she's looking in the mirror when the other girl comes in, and the way that she looks at her through the reflection of the mirror, there's just so much evocation, but there's nothing said. And, half of it's the performance and half of it's the camera angle, and both of them are excellent. It's just, there's certain stuff in this movie that is truly phenomenal. And honestly, I might just have such a visceral negative reaction to the film.
Just not happy.
That I don't want to put it up there. But the more that we're talking the more I do feel like it deserves consideration for me to be put in that category. It just, I don't like what happens to these girls so much that
makes sense.
It doesn't feel like I had a positive experience with the film.
Yeah. I love the dinner scene. I was shocked at how long it went on. I did not expect that, but my mind was just bouncing back and forth between, as I watched her, thinking about to what extent her mind is just elsewhere, processing what has just happened, versus
the phone rings, no one answers it.
Yeah. Versus her listening to this conversation, which is also interesting because they're talking and bringing her into the conversation at times, but she also seems so distant.
And all these guys are smoking, and then this fucking guy tells her to not smoke.
Fuck that guy.
Right?
I hate
I'm
that
glad
guy.
you said that, because fuck that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't even thought about that in the moment, but yeah, I did kind of hate that guy because of what she's just gone through. Like that, yeah, that particularly pissed me off.
Yeah. I definitely had a feeling like I was watching a prison film a lot. Not just because of the cigarettes, but a lot because of the cigarettes. The fact that cigarettes are essentially a currency really builds a different world that feels familiar, but also totally different. Because I don't ask you, hey, Michael, do you want Kent's or some other type of cigarette? I just don't care.
Yeah.
And we don't smoke. It's just, it's so different. It feels like a different world, but these are humans. They have human problems. Watching her sidle up slowly to get a ticket from someone on the train or the bus. There's just so much about this version, this place of existence that I'm unfamiliar with. I don't really know what to say other than it's moving, I guess.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. It's that minutia, the detail of these scenes, her just kind of getting from one place to another, stopping to buy cigarettes or trying to figure out the hotel thing, that just give me like such a perfectly clear sense of what daily life in this social system under communism is like. All these little exchanges that just make up your day to day. And obviously there is a clear plot here. There is something happening, but it's also just a really clear portrayal of what this time and place was like, and what it felt like to just go through a day, a particularly unique day. But yeah, I was surprised. I didn't realize going in that we were going to be hewing so close to the friend and not the girl who's actually getting the abortion. But by getting to follow her, we just get a look at all of these different things she has to do and all these different people she has to interact with and how unique those interactions are.
Be honest. How annoyed were you with her friend by the end of the film?
It's complex.
It's very complex, right? Because you want to be on her side, but Jesus Christ, did she do anything right? No plastic sheet, no money, didn't book the hotel, lied to, there's so many problems. I'm on her side, but there's so many problems.
Yeah.
And it makes me so passionate. It's a success.
Yeah, I think it's been a long time. I vaguely remember, I think it was Roger Ebert who really liked it, but mentioned in his review something about her, I think he used the word stupidity. Which
I'm not gonna disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is it's hard to even think of using that word because of what she has to go for. But you're right, she's not helping herself much. But,
her line is, "I didn't lie to you. I just didn't tell you."
Mm-hmm.
To her friend, who's doing everything for her. It's a problem, but it's also a film that I don't know. You never want to say something's necessary, but it definitely feels near that.
Yeah. Yeah, and because we're hewing more towards the friend's perspective, we don't get much sense for what's driving all of those kind of mistakes and misjudgments except that you can just empathize with her just being so overwhelmed, so scared, so eager to just get it over with that she's just not thinking straight.
I mean, I would push back against the way you closed that, eager to get it over with. I mean, from what we find out, she's the opposite of that.
That's fair. That's fair.
And she's been putting it off and not, and
maybe
that's
in
the
denial
other
almost.
problem about it is that it's the culture where it's a culture of denial, and yeah, it definitely makes some, it's hard to talk about this maybe without getting political, I would say.
Yeah.
But it definitely embraces my summations about this issue and shows a pretty good physical day-to-day life that lines up with what I personally think. And it shows you the hard part of it, which is the part that I think makes everybody question their views on it. But it also shows the other hard parts that happen to these girls because of the way that the system is and the fact that this is going to happen anyways. And all I can say is I really appreciated that look at it, that truthful look that's honest and brutal and upsetting. And, it definitely, I think, leads viewers towards a sense of compassion rather than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. And there's something about how it's very tightly focused, but that this doesn't feel like something that would be uncommon, particularly in the way that the quote-unquote doctor, I feel generous using that word. I don't know that
Let's
he
call him
is
Mr.
qualified.
Baby.
Correct. Mr. Bebe. He just seems to know exactly how this is going to play out. He's kind of very easily anticipating, one of her lies after the other.
Mm-hmm.
And after he's about to walk out the door and the friend says, okay, I'll do it. He comes back in and so quickly, like without a hesitation, starts taking off his shoes. Like he knew she was going to give in. And it just suggests to me that like, it's just nothing new. He's done it before. He's seen these girls feel so vulnerable, so desperate that he
he's
can
definitely
just toy
a
with them.
predator. And that's one of the main problems.
Yeah.
I guess I can't say it's the main problem, but it's one of them. And there's a few in this film, and he's disgusting and sickly, and that's a bummer.
Yeah, and it feels like it's partly the filmmaking, that it's not suggesting this is an epiphany, an idea he's had, that this is a strategy, essentially. That's almost kind of casual for him, especially in the way he leaves, where he's like, peace, I'm out of here.
And she says that, or he says you could call me, and then she's like, no, never,
no thanks.
That's like the first time she acted with, authority, with any sense of clarity as a person, since we got to know her, really, and she asked for a particular brand of cigarettes in the beginning. That was, to me, her first turn back to being someone who says things that are true, because essentially the entire middle of the film, other than those two bookends, is just us finding out where she lied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and it's not like you want to root against her or anything. It's just that's maybe, an honest portrayal of what it's like to be her. It's hard to say. I don't think that it's trying to be mean. It's just trying to be. Yeah.
Sort of what it leaves us wondering about her is, just kind of a void that makes me so like sad in a way. It makes it even harder because she feels that much more alone in that, like, we're not even really with her in a way. I was not expecting that.
What do you think about the choice to have a lingering long shot on the fetus?
You're throwing me softballs here, huh?
I thought, what do you think about the brand of cigarettes, Kent? Or what do you think about the lingering shot of the dead fetus on a towel in the bathroom?
I think I'm glad it's there.
It's tough.
It is. Oh, it's tough.
I was right there. Just standing right there, and I just couldn't believe that it was still going. That it was still just... There was no action in the background. It was just a lingering long shot, and it made me so uncomfortable. It's an interesting choice, and it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. I think the way it ends as we watch the roommate or the friend who actually has the abortion just appear so like empty, so unfeeling at the end. I think it just helps us understand that, like, just how distraught you would feel after seeing that. Even if you were in the most perfect warm of circumstances, like, it's going to be hard. But in this circumstance, and having to do that, like, and look at it in such a cold, miserable way would just be awful.
Yeah, it's a hard film in general. Like, the scene in the bedroom with her boyfriend after the dinner scene is so interesting because at no point in the film does it ever address that stuff until right then. And then it makes it all about, well, what would you do? And he never has a solution. And that's, to me, the claim that you can make it at a larger level, that it's fine, you're not thinking about it, whatever, but what are you going to do if it happened right now? And then it's just stammering, and I'll take care of it without ever saying what that is. And I think that that's the entire message, if you will, of the film, at least in my view, that it's fine for you to say all that stuff, but what are you actually going to do right now?
Yeah.
Because it's always right now, somewhere.
Yeah. I would ask what your favorite scene is, but that just doesn't really feel like the right question for this one. Any things that just stood out to you?
There's definitely a favorite
Anything
scene.
that really seared in your memory?
Yeah, cinematography-wise, there's some great cinematography in this film. You can't overlook it just because it's so harsh. When she bags the fetus and she's running around in the street, away from dark shadows and what appears to be men walking behind her ominously, that was fascinating cinematography. I would have to still go with the dinner scene, though. I do think that or the bathroom scene after the rape are the two most compelling pieces of cinematography in the film, and their performances in each of those are so excellent. They're not great, they're not good, they're excellent, they're awesome, they're professionals. It's a pleasure to see.
Yeah, good picks. I might just go with the shot, which I think is after she has already bagged the fetus and is frantically running around, like you said, and she runs across the bridge and then gets on the bus. Yes. Like, you see her get on the bus.
The turn style is captured in the scene, right? Where the bus has that little hinge in it.
In the bottom right hand of the corner, you mean? Right? Yeah.
So that was such a cool shot.
Yeah, I think, like, to the extent that this feels like a Dardenne movie, it is sometimes in those tracking shots where it's kind of handheld and rough and tumble and very just real. But then we get those shots that feel kind of composed, like he follows her and then he stops as she crosses this bridge, goes down the stairs, and we see her in the bottom right-hand corner of the frame. Like, that's not something we would see in those other films. But I think it's just important for that sense of emptiness. We're suddenly just kind of looking at this empty frame, and to me that's kind of the feeling that I'm left with as I watch the girls, particularly in that final shot, is just that sort of, empty stomach feeling of having gone through something so gross, so awful, that he's doing just with his art. It's great.
It is. Yeah, there's a lot there. I think that, similar to Portrait of a Lady on Fire, this film addresses the kind of the stuff that isn't part of day-to-day male life that we incorporate into us as people, and I definitely appreciate that about it. Yeah, more thinking to do on it. It's a great film, but I would not encourage most people I know to watch it.
I think you had thrown this one out there, and in 2 weeks, we'll perhaps record a conversation on Never Rarely, Sometimes Always. We'll be very interested to see how they speak to each other.
Yeah, this is a good bit of homework for that, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
There
we go.
One of our heavier episodes, Michael.
It is.
Let's take a nice reprieve this week. Maybe watch some comedies, huh?
I like that.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
You're the best and we love you!
And that's another one in the can. A heavy one in the can. Extra weight.